Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. The UFC welterweight division is an absolute shambles. It is a complete catastrophe. And I believe there was two major events over the course of the last year that caused it to be in the state that it currently is. But honestly, the welterweight division has always been kind of funny over the past few years in terms of having contenders not fight other contenders. We're going to talk about all that in this video. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because you go back to UFC 286. You had Leon Edwards defeat Kamaru Usman in the immediate rematch to retain the welterweight title. And then you had the whole Colby Covington situation. In this video, we're going to discuss the real reason that Colby Covington is getting a title shot. I already made a video about it, but we're going to talk about it in this video as well. We're also going to discuss at UFC 287, Gilbert Burns defeated Jorge Masvidal. And he made some remarks at the post-fight presser. And honestly, at this point, I'm ready to say the UFC should cut Gilbert Burns. That's how aggravating the remarks that Gilbert Burns made at UFC 287 at the post-fight presser. We're going to look at the clip later in the video. That's how aggravating they were. And they are a trend in the welterweight division. The UFC has set a dangerous precedent. And I'm also going to discuss what I think is actually going to happen in the welterweight division. So first off, what were the two major events that caused the welterweight division to be in the current state that it is in? I believe the first event, UFC 278, Kamaru Usman winning the majority of the fight and getting brutally head kick KO'd in the 5th round. Because you have a situation where you move over a month later to UFC 279 and you have Khamzat Chimaev miss weight for his welterweight main event against Nate Diaz. And what should have happened in a perfect world is you have Kamaru Usman defeat Leon Edwards at UFC 278. You have Khamzat Chimaev defeat Nate Diaz at UFC 279. Wreck Nate Diaz. He was going to wreck him badly. He was going to destroy him. He was going to rip his head off. It was going to be a first round brutal finish. And then Khamzat Chimaev was already kind of a star in the MMA community. And he beats Nate Diaz where all the casuals are like, Nate Diaz is going to beat Khamzat. He's going to pull off the upset. You build Khamzat's star power even bigger, and then you have Kamaru Usman, who's been a long-reigning dominant champion, and you essentially have the welterweight boogeyman in Khamzat Chimaev. Well, that entire plan went to waste. Kamaru Usman lost, Khamzat Chimaev missed weight, so the UFC decided, okay, we're booking the immediate rematch. Kamaru Usman won the majority of the fight. He got, KO'd in the 5th round, and we need to book this fight. Kamaru Usman's been a long-reigning champion. Well, then you fast forward to UFC 286. Leon Edwards defeats Kamaru Usman via decision. I actually thought this fight was much closer than some people said. And honestly, I thought it should have been a draw. But Leon Edwards holds on to the belt. He beats Kamaru Usman. But in the meantime, what was supposed to happen in a perfect world is we were supposed to get Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington. The UFC talked about this. The fans wanted this. Everybody wanted this fight, except for it appeared Colby Covington. And we don't know for sure. There's a bunch of different claims being thrown out there. But Colby Covington, over the past few years, has been known to turn down fights. And he was in witness protection since his win over Jorge Masvidal. And what that fight was supposed to be a number one contender fight. If Khamzat won, he's the clear-cut number one contender. He had to make weight again. And Colby Covington, he already had 2 shots. But if you beat a guy like Khamzat Chimaev that nobody really wants to fight, and you beat him decisively, you probably have earned another shot at the title. That fight doesn't happen. It seems like Colby Covington's just sitting out for a while, turning down fights. He's in witness protection. But that leads me to, well, why is Colby Covington getting guaranteed a title shot now? If he's turning down fights, he doesn't want to fight anyone. He's not on a massive win streak at all. He's already had 2 title shots. He's only on a 1-fight winning streak against Jorge Masvidal. Well, why is he getting a title shot? I made an entire video about this. I'll link it down in the description if you want to go check it out. The real reason that Colby Covington is getting a title shot, and I will die on this hill, and I believe that this is the case, is I believe Kamaru Usman was close to pulling out of the fight at UFC 278 or 286. 286, March of this year. And I believe the UFC knew that event was going to die without Kamaru Usman, because then the welterweight main event would be canceled. They called Colby Covington the week of the fight and said, can you make weight? He said yes. He flew to the UK. He made weight. He was ready to back up in case Kamaru Usman had to pull out. And the UFC looks at the favors like that, and they let that benefit the fighters in the future. Dana White privilege, essentially. Colby flew over there. He made the weight. And so the UFC is now like, well, you know what? Leon Edwards held onto the belt. You never fought Leon Edwards before. We are going to guarantee you a title shot. So that's already problematic because Colby Covington's on a 1-fight winning streak. And he's not beat anyone currently in the top 10 of the division. And he's been super inactive. And he's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. And I know people are claiming Colby's a draw. He sells pay-per-views. There is no evidence of that. Colby Covington does not sell over 1 million pay-per-views. Okay, maybe he's more of a draw than someone like Belal Muhammad, who we'll talk about in a second. But it's not like, stop acting like Colby Covington's some Conor McGregor. There's no evidence of that. It does not exist. Colby Covington may draw more than Belal Muhammad, but Colby Covington's not some massive star in the sport. But he's now guaranteed a title shot. Well, you have Leon Edwards, who is now saying, I'm not fighting Colby. I don't want to fight Colby. And I'm not signing that bout agreement. And then you have a report come out, Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington happening at UFC 291 in July in the UK, in London. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. It's being reported, just regurgitated around the MMA community. But I never really saw a legitimate source say it's official. I just saw people saying, oh, it's being targeted, which doesn't necessarily mean the fight contracts are signed. And then you have Leon Edwards do an interview recently where he says, look, I'm not fighting in July. That's not happening. I need to nurse some injuries. I need some time off. He said, I'm not fighting until October. Ideally, I want to fight in Abu Dhabi, which is like UFC 293 or 294. I don't remember exactly. But he said, I'm not fighting Colby in July. And he's already said, I'm not fighting Colby, period. So the division is just a complete mess. And you have a situation, even if Colby Covington gets a title shot, it's completely undeserved. It's completely unwarranted. The guy has won 1 fight and is against Jorge Masvidal. He's on a 1-fight winning streak, and he's 2-2 in his last 4. And his biggest claims, when you ask somebody about Colby Covington's resume, all they do is highlight his 2 losses to Kamaru Usman. We are elevating guys off of losses. Okay, Colby Covington, here's your participation trophy for losing and getting finished by Kamaru Usman and then losing via decision in a rematch. And now you 50-45 to Jorge Masvidal, who's on his way out the door. Now we're going to give you a title shot. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I understand why the UFC is doing it in the event. Basically, they owe Colby for what he did at UFC 286, which if Dana White just came out and said that, which he kind of has, I would understand. If he said, look, Usman was going to pull out, Colby was going to step in, we owe him for that. This is a fresh matchup. He's one of the best in the division. I could accept that. But people have to stop acting like Colby's some massive draw and he deserves this fight. So the division's already in a wonky place, especially when you have a guy like Belal Muhammad, who, if you ignore the no contest, he's essentially on an 8-fight win streak. And then you have Shavkat Rakmonov, who has won so many fights in a row, undefeated in MMA, 17 fights, 17 finishes, coming off that big win over Jeff Neal. I believe both Belal Muhammad and Shavkat Rakmonov are more deserving than Colby Covington. But who knows if Colby Covington is even fighting for the title, because it was rumored to happen in July. Leon say it's definitely not happening in July, and I'm not fighting Colby. So what is actually going to happen? And it just leaves everything up in the air. And I'm going to get to what I actually think happens in a little bit. But Leon said he's not fighting until October. And then you have Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns defeated Jorge Masvidal at UFC 287, the co-main event. The dead corpse of Congressman Jorge Masvidal. And Jorge Masvidal retires afterwards because he's just not invested in it anymore. He's too old. The skills aren't there anymore. The skill deficit against Gilbert Burns was so clear. And Gilbert Burns almost looked like he was taking it easy on Jorge Masvidal, even though you have Joe Rogan saying the 3rd round was close, which is completely delusional. They need to fire Joe Rogan for even suggesting the 3rd round was close, which is a topic for a whole nother video. But besides the point, then you have Gilbert Burns defeat Jorge Masvidal. And now he's looking at Colby Covington. He's like, well, Colby Covington's on a 1-fight win streak and he beat Jorge Masvidal. Maybe I deserve a title shot now because I'm on a 2-fight win streak and I just beat Jorge Masvidal. And this is just an absolute ridiculous line of thinking because Jorge Masvidal isn't even good. Jorge Masvidal is on the decline of his career. Obviously, he just retired. But Gilbert Burns is looking at what Colby Covington has been able to achieve And guess what he said at his post-fight presser? We're going to take a look at it in a second. But he basically demanded a welterweight title shot. Let's take a look at what he said at the presser.
I'm going to be a backup. I'm going to. I'm not asking. I'm demanding that I'm going to, because whenever they ask, anytime the UFC gave me a call asking for an opponent, I say yes. And now I'm demanding that I'm going out there. I'm going to do my training camp to 5 rounds. I go to London. I'll be the backup, and I'm the next online. I'm not online. I'm next in line to fight for the title. And otherwise, let me go, my guy. Let me do my thing, you know. These guys making $1 million here on the other organizations, you know, step up. That's it. I'm fighting. I'm a backup for the next fight, and I'm fighting for the title next.
So there you hear it straight from Gilbert Burns. I am demanding to be the backup for Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington, and if not, cut me. You have a win over Neil Magny and his hairline, and then Jorge Masvidal, who's on his way out the door, retired. He may come back for some YouTube boxing match, but he's done. And now you think you deserve a title fight over the likes of Belal Muhammad and Shavkat Rakmonov? Gilbert Burns is one of my favorite fighters. I salute him for taking the Khamzat Chimaev fight. But stop acting like just because you took the Khamzat Chimaev fight and lost, and now you beat up Neil Magny and you beat up Jorge Masvidal, the dead corpse of Jorge Masvidal, now all of a sudden you deserve a title shot? The welterweight division is completely screwed up. And honestly, I think they need to cut Gilbert Burns. Let him go to PFL. You can make $1 million at PFL. You don't deserve a title shot. You're nowhere close to a title shot. And if Gilbert Burns gets a title shot next, no matter who wins, let's say Leon Edwards, Colby Covington happens, which we're not even sure it's going to happen. If he gets the next title shot, I think I'm going to throw up. And I like Gilbert Burns a lot. And I think there's a better case for Gilbert Burns over Colby Covington. So now the welterweight division is a division where we're just throwing out undeserved title shots because the UFC has hinted at doing Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakmonov. Now that's going to happen. I don't know when, but probably in the next couple months, probably long before Leon Edwards defends his belt next. If Belal Muhammad, on his long win streak already, beats Shavkat Rakmonov, Belal Muhammad's a clear-cut #1 contender, no doubt about it. It would be egregious to step over him to give someone else a title shot over him. It'd be ridiculous. If Shavkat Rakmonov, 17 pro MMA wins, undefeated, and 17 finishes, if he beats Belal Muhammad and he doesn't get the next title shot after Colby Covington, that is craziness for Gilbert Burns, who's had a title shot, lost to Kamaru Usman, beat Neil Magny, beat Jorge Masvidal, and also has a loss to Khamzat Chimaev, who he ruined the whole division by missing weight, and now he's going to go up to middleweight, which saves the middleweight division a bit because Izzy has no opponents. But still, this is a complete and utter catastrophe, and the UFC has now set the precedent. I'm just going to sit out. I want to sit out. I haven't even won any fights. I'm not even fighting legitimate contenders. I'm fighting Neil Magny and Jorge Masvidal. At this point, I'm going to try to cut down to 170. I'm going to get Mike Dolce to help me cut down to 170. I'm going to beat up Jorge Masvidal. I want a welterweight title shot. I want to be UFC champ. That's how I feel at this point. Jorge Masvidal is washed up. He's been washed up. And now we're just giving everyone and their mother a title shot for a win over Jorge Masvidal. And neither of these guys even finished him. Now, in a perfect world, what I ideally would like to see is I would like to see Leon Edwards fight either Belal Muhammad or Shavkat Rakmonov. I believe they are the two most deserving. If Leon is going to sit out until October, nursing injuries, he needs time off, whatever, do Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakmonov for #1 contender, or do one of those two versus Colby Covington for #1 contender fight. If the UFC is so dead set, do that fight. What do I think will ultimately happen? It's a little bit of a tricky scenario because if the UFC really gets angry at Leon Edwards for what he's doing, he's saying he's not going to fight in July unless they pay him a big bag of money. The UFC could do an interim title fight. They could do, and what they most likely would do, I think, is they would do Belal Muhammad versus Colby Covington in July for the interim welterweight title, and then the winner would fight Leon Edwards. But that doesn't really hurt Leon Edwards. And actually, I think that's a better scenario than Colby just waiting till October and fighting Leon. But honestly, the UFC is probably going to try to force Leon's hand. It looks like the July pay-per-view at least the early July, UFC 290 is already taken up. There was speculation about that, but then there was real talk of UFC 291. They could try to redo the schedule and maybe have like an August pay-per-view in the UK and put Colby versus Leon on there and kind of get the best of both worlds, where you give Leon Edwards extra time, but not necessarily delay the fight too much. But this is just an absolute catastrophe, and I just hate the division at this point, because you have a scenario where contenders don't want to fight other contenders, no one wants to get on a win streak, and everyone's claiming they deserve a title shot. How egregious is it that Colby Covington, 1-fight win streak, title shot? Gilbert Burns, 2-fight win streak, title shot. Meanwhile, you have Belal Muhammad, who's actually beating ranked contenders. Sean Brady, I believe, was ranked in the top 10 when he beat him. Vicente Luque looked like a world beater when he beat him. And Wonderboy Thompson, who's still top ranked at this point. So 3 top 10 wins in his last 3 fights alone. And he's not getting a title shot. Flat out smack in the face to MMA fans. But what is ultimately going to happen? I feel like the UFC might try to force Leon Edwards' hand to fight in July on that UK pay-per-view. They may, kind of meet in the middle and move it to August, which I already talked about a bit. But I also do believe they could do that interim welterweight title fight. And if I'm picking the fight, it's got to be Belal Muhammad versus Colby Covington. And I think that's a decent sized fight. I don't think it's like the biggest drawing fight ever, but I do believe that's a fight that could headline a pay-per-view. I think the build-up would be unique because you have Belal Muhammad, who's kind of cringy, but isn't afraid to speak in his mind. And you have Colby Covington, stumbling over his pre-written lines. He paid a guy $5 to write for him before he went out on the press conference. So I think that fight would kind of be fun. But at the same time, I just hate this division. If it was really, truly up to me, I could do whatever I wanted with the division. I would book probably Belal Muhammad, Leon Edwards 2, which isn't the, best looking fight on paper. And then I would book Shavkat Rakmonov versus Colby Covington for -- contender. And then Gilbert Burns, he's just going to have to wait and see. There's not really a clear-cut fight for him right now. He's already fought Wonderboy Thompson, beat Wonderboy Thompson. Jeff Neal just lost. So Gilbert Burns is kind of odd man out. He could do the Kamaru Usman rematch. That would kind of make sense. But I don't know. This division is just completely warped and completely I just don't even want to look at it anymore. I don't care about the welterweight division. People are getting undeserved title shots. People are claiming they need to get a title shot or they're being cut. Gilbert Burns saying he needs to be the backup or cut him. The UFC should just cut him then, if that's the case. If that's what you want to claim, that you are unequivocally on a 2-fight win streak, you beat up Neil Magny and Jorge Masvidal, just cut him. Honestly, as crazy as that sounds, I like Gilbert Burns. I like watching him fight. He's getting up there in age. He's claiming, I deserve a title shot over Jorge Masvidal. Disgusting. And this is the precedent the UFC set. I hate the welterweight division. Hopefully something good comes out of all this. Hopefully, in a best case scenario, it would be Belal Muhammad, Colby Covington for a #1 contender spot this summer. And then they turn that winner around to fight Leon Edwards in October. That is the ideal scenario. And Belal Muhammad seems like the only guy who's willing to fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. And I know he's kind of like, Shavkat, what's going on with Shavkat? I think ultimately Belal Muhammad will take that fight if the UFC offers it to him. But the division is such a weird spot right now. I wish Kamaru Usman would have defeated Leon Edwards last summer. And I wish Khamzat Chimaev would have made weight and just ripped Nate Diaz's head off. And that would have been one of the biggest fights ever. And now instead, we got this complete mess of a welterweight division. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I pretty much covered everything regarding the welterweight division. It's just a weird spot right now. Let me know what you guys think. I'm genuinely curious. How would you like to see it play out? What do you think the UFC will do ultimately? Will it actually play out? And let me know what you think of everything I said in this video. I'm genuinely curious. There was a lot to go over. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I will see you guys in the next video.